Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is part 2 of What If Naruto was teleported into Final Fantasy X. If you guys enjoy this what if, then comment, like and subscribe. Let's go. Also, the video goal is 10 likes, so let me know that you're interested in the series and you want the next part. Then go ahead and check out the other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave. Also share the video with your friends and link in the description. So let's go. Then I accept you as my guardian, Naruto, Yuna announced with a soft smile. Yosh. Naruto grinned excitedly and bumped his fist into the air. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go, guys, he stated and walked ahead of them. However, after a moment of walking, Naruto stopped abruptly and turned his head around to look at the people that were still standing behind him. Smiling nervously, he decided to ask, exactly where are we going? His question caused everyone to react differently. While Waka put his hands on his hips and laughed loudly and Yuna placed a hand over her mouth to muffle a soft giggle, Lulu could only shake her head in disappointment while sighing in defeat. Titus, however, could only look at Naruto while scratching the back of his head in confusion. We're heading to the port, Lulu decided to explain while passing him. Oh, alright then. Naruto nodded his head before looking around. He noticed someone was missing. Hold on, where is Kamari? He has already gone ahead to scout the area from the more dangerous fiends. Waka answered as he took the lead as everyone followed him to the village's gate. Though, keep your eyes open, there are many fiends lurking around at this time of the day. Oh, alright then. Yuna followed them gradually for a moment before she hesitated and stopped suddenly. Turning around, the young summoner beheld the temple of Besaid Island one last time. Letting its mighty structure fill the masses of her glorious dual eyes, Yuna took a step back and made the prayer of Yevon, taking her time to keep the temple within her sights. In the meantime, Naruto and the others had reached the village entrance posts. Naruto turned his head around and was surprised to see that Yuna hadn't followed. He looked back to her as she bent reverently in prayer to the temple. This world was so bizarre to him, with strange customs to match. Yevon was something the people here adhered to resolutely. Religion was a concept that the young hero of the shinobi world had never paid much attention to, and as a matter of fact, it wasn't common practice in elemental nations, to begin with. Yuna, you coming? Naruto asked loudly, catching her attention. Yes, please wait for me. After ripping her longing gaze from the temple, Yuna caught up to the others. Together they proceeded to the village slope that led up to the flat promontory. It didn't take long, however, for the tranquil serenity to be disturbed, as the fiends were up to and were raring to go. Here comes trouble, Naruto informed them, and instantly, two dingoes shot out of the nearby bushes. They had the appearances of a large wolf with orange fur, but bigger and were more evil-looking. They were a common type of fiend that could be found all over the island, but it was actually the first time Naruto had seen them. Springing before the group suddenly, the fiends lingered watchfully in the dense island shrubbery, waiting for the right moment to strike. Curling its lip back, they leered voraciously, hoping a tasty meal would soon be on the agenda. I will fight too. Yuna gripped her magic rod tightly and took a step forward, but was stopped by Lulu. Let the boys handle these fiends, Yuna, the black mage told her, and Yuna could only nod her head. Waka plunged his way towards them, halting its hungry advances. Titus followed suit and stood prone in front of them. Instantly one of them darted forward, launching an attack for the Titus ankle, but he quickly zipped out of the way, dodging the attack with ease as the jaws clasped the empty air. Enraged by its failure, the creature spun around, growling severely from its shuddering throat. Alright, let's see what our new guardian is made of, Waka stated. Naruto, you go ahead. Oh, alright then. Naruto nodded and reached his hand behind him. His eyes hardened, pulled out two shurikens from his porch and threw them at the dingoes with great accuracy. The weapons traveled through the air unseen, before they stabbed into the fiends' heads, ending their lives. Whoa! Waka gasped in surprise while the fiends' bodies dispersed into pyre flies. What was that? Naruto moved so fast his eyes could barely follow. What did you do? What are those weapons? He asked when Naruto stepped forward to pick up his throwing weapons, which fell down to the ground the moment the fiends had completely disappeared. These. Naruto showed them the shuriken in his hand. They are shuriken, one of the most basic ninja weapons. Naruto explained as everyone gathered around him. They're small but very sharp, so if you throw them accurate enough, they can kill or incapacitate an enemy. Seriously. Waka gasped in surprise as he took a shuriken from Naruto and examined it with close eyes. You say one of the most basic tools, so you mean there are more? Lulu asked as she looked at the oscillator on Naruto's thigh in the porch behind him. Yeah, we have many in our arsenal. Naruto reached his hand down to the oscillator and pulled out a kunai, a dagger-like weapon with a handle wrapped in bandages and a small ring attached to the end of it. For example, this is a kunai, useful for fighting close range as well as throwing. He then reached his hand into his pouch and pulled out a small sphere wrapped in papers, and this is a smoke bomb. He tossed it to the side. The smoke bomb detonated as soon as it came into contact with the ground, creating a large cloud of smoke. Like Fuinjutsu, a ninja's use of weaponry in combat is called Bukijutsu. Buki, jutsu. Yuna repeated, trying her best to spell the word right. Literally meaning weapon techniques. Naruto nodded with a smile. Why do I have the feeling that there are a lot of these, jutsu? But seriously man, is there anything else we need to know about you? Waka asked as he put his hands on his hips, you surprise us every time you do something. Well, Naruto put his weapons away and grinned sheepishly, I don't know, there are a lot of them. Their jaws dropped in shock and amazement, maybe I will show you guys later. He's right, it's time for us to go. Lulu told them. However, it wasn't long before they were assailed yet again. The grunts and howls of the enraged dingoes had attracted far too much attention than any of them had bargained for. Another dingo appeared, however, this time, it was accompanied by a smoky blue bird fiend that shot down from the trees. It plummeted down towards them, aiming its long beak at any potential target. That is some nasty-looking bird right there, Naruto commented. A flyer. A wide grin passed over the redhead's face as he beheld the small hovering creature. It was no bigger than the blitzball under his arm, just my kind of customer. After saying that, Waka flung the blitzball toward the unsuspecting bird. The ball whacked the fiend square on the beak, sending it colliding back to where it came from with a momentous crash before falling to the ground, dead. Waka caught the ball and turned to Titus. With a wry grin, he suggested, hey, why don't you try out that new sword I gave you? The blonde nodded his head and released the brotherhood from the sheath upon his back. The large sword rang through the air gracefully as Titus brought it down slowly before him. Snarling angrily, the fiends charged toward him with it mouth slobbering, fully aligned with razor-sharp teeth. Titus skipped away as it made a desperate lunge for him, dodging it almost too easily. Naruto had to admit, Titus would make a fine shinobi if he was trained from the young age. In the instant that the fiend passed by him, Titus drove his tremendous blade down upon the creature's neck. The dingo was carved in two with a single clean cut. No problem, Titus proclaimed as he watched the battered form of the dead fiend dissipate into nothing. Not too shabby. You kept up with him pretty well. Waka complimented from the sidelines. Might make a good guardian one day. He added with a cheeky grin. Great work Titus. Yuna smiled encouragingly as she looked at the blitzball player, who laughed nervously while scratching the back of his head. She then turned to Naruto, and looked at him strangely when she saw the frown on his face. What's it, Naruto? Why did they sound so angry? Naruto said in a small voice, but enough for everyone to hear. Also I have met a lot of wild animals in my life, and while they might be fiends, their feelings, it's humans' emotion, envy. He then shook his head. No, forget it, maybe it's just my imagination. His statement left Yuna and Lulu completely speechless and they could only look at each other with eyes wide in surprise. The five of them continued to walk on the dusty slope, crossing the hill, waterfall and then forest. It wasn't long before the promontory came into view, but the fiends simply refused to stay low and let them cross the island easily. Another fiend soon appeared out of nowhere before them. This one, however, was rather abnormal. Its body was formed out of what seemed to be a translucent blue jelly substance that wobbled all over sloppily when it moved. That looks like trouble, Waka said, eyeing its strange jagged features dubiously. Naruto grinned and rushed over, pulling a kunai from the oscillator. Hey! Watch this. This is how you use a kunai. He sped up to the sluggish-looking fiend and thrust his blade at full speed, aiming for the creature's head. However, the kunai simply went through the fiend and stuck solid inside its body. What the? Naruto exclaimed in surprise and tried to retrieve his weapon, but instead of letting go, its glutinous substance body sucked his weapon in like a vacuum. Before he could do anything, a tremendous blast of ice-cold water spewed out from the creature's body, catching Naruto off guard. The water splashed onto his face, and the sheer pressure of the momentous spray alone was enough to knock the blonde onto his back abruptly. Told ya. Waka grinned, standing over him, only magic can beat that thing. If you can't beat them down, you gotta use the magic of an element they don't like. Magic. Naruto rose to his feet. Lulu. Yep, let's have our black mage take over for now. Waka replied, looking back. Lu. You're up. Lulu quickly rushed towards them, holding a strange pink doll in her arm. You fight with a doll? Naruto asked in disbelief, looking at the doll in her hand. And he thought Waka fighting with a ball was weird. What I fight with is none of your business. The busty black mage gave him a stern glare upon arrival. Better stay back and let grown-up handle this, ninja boy. Focusing her magic energy upon the blue fiend before her, Lulu raised her free arm, hand above her head before she unclasped her fist. Crackling bolts of electric blue lightning darted from her fingertips before bursting into the creature, setting it ablaze in an electrical explosion. The fiend writhed in pain before melting away to nothing, leaving only Naruto's kunai on the dry ground. Whoa, Titus gasped in amazement as the display of black magic. What was that? It was a water fiend, so you have to fight it with lightning magic. Lulu explained, turning to Naruto, that was just an example of the type of fiends you cannot fight with your weapons. It would be better if you boys just leave them to me. Oh yeah, Naruto smirked challengingly, wait till we meet the next one, and I'm gonna show you that I'm fully capable of defeating them. Lulu said nothing because she knew that the boy still had many tricks up his sleeves, and they would surprise her and everyone in the end. Passing by him with a perturbed sigh, Lulu mounted the flat promontory and stood by the side where the loose fencing was. Yuna soon joined her in watching over the village with a distant gaze. Take your time, the black mage voiced calmly. The young summoner complied and let her eyes linger on her island home a little while longer. Let's get going, man. Titus told Naruto with a grin and a light slap on his back, you will have your chance to impress her soon. Impress. Naruto snickered while shaking his head, whoever said I wanted to impress her. After that, he followed Titus and Waka but stopped. The latter held out his arm to stop them. Hold on, Waka said seriously before folding his arms on his chest, we're gonna wait. His face was now completely solemn. Huh, Titus didn't understand. Yuna turned away from the side, tearing her thoughts from the village she had spent the past 7 years at. Are you ready? Waka voiced, sounding so edgy all of a sudden. Yes. She nodded in reply before passing him slowly. What's going on? Naruto inquired, totally disconcerted. Why are you guys becoming so mysterious all of a sudden? His fellow guardians didn't reply and merely moved their attention to the cylindrical obelisk. It's an ancient custom, people leaving the island to pray here for a safe trip, Waka explained, letting his fingers run over the deeply carved rock surface. Chappu didn't pray that day, said he'd miss his boat. The pain was evident in the islander's eyes as he uttered those words. I see, Naruto nodded his head and couldn't help but glance toward Lulu, but her face was hidden from his view by the bands which covered half of her face. While Titus joined them as they kneeled in reverence to the bizarre object and prayed for their journey, Naruto decided that he should just stand there and watch them. It was just that he didn't believe in Yevon like Yuna and the others. It was their religion, not his. Their journey to Besaid port continued. They quickly passed down onto the new path and met a huge ruin that shadowed the dry ground with its tremendous form. It looked almost spidery with its thick solid struts that reached down from its sides, embedding themselves firmly into the ground. Hey, Naruto suddenly spoke up while looking up, isn't that Kimari? He asked when he saw the blue Ronso leaping strongly from strut to strut with great agility. Damn, he's good. Naruto commented with a smirk before raising his voice, hey Kimari, I have become Yuna, but before he could finish that sentence, Kimari burst down before him, with his eyes wild with a savage rage, and arms open ready to snap upon him. Widening his eyes in surprise, Naruto jumped back, avoiding the Ronso when he hit the ground with an earth-shattering bang. The shinobi looked on in disbelief as the man-beast crouched pulsating with rage before him. Oi! What has gotten into you? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Kamari, what are— Yuna stepped forward and tried to talk to her guardian, but Waka held out a hand and placed it on her shoulder, stopping her. Don't worry Yuna. Kamari knows what he is doing. The Blitzball captain stated firmly. So, hearing that, Naruto couldn't help but ask, this is a test, right? You want to test my abilities, don't you? He raised his hands, with one hand holding his kunai. Despite saying that, he could feel Kamari's emotions, and anger, as well as hatred, weren't the most positive emotions to have in a test. Kamari said nothing and continued to grow like an animal. His monstrous hands buckled and jarred as he carved his razor-like claws aggressively on the ground, leaving marks there. With a tremendous surge of anger, the blue Ronso smashed his large hands into the solid ground, making the earth shudder beneath Naruto's feet. His muscles upon its body seemed to expand and swell larger. Naruto, meanwhile, kept his ground and looked at the Ronso straight in the eyes, showing no fear, only confident. Come and get me. Naruto turned his free hand around, made a come-over gesture with his hand. In a colossal display of power, the man-beast stretched his arms, unleashing an ear-splitting roar, revealing its terrifyingly huge fangs before lunging towards Naruto, with its eyes glinted with the hunger for battle. Faster than they could imagine, Naruto bent his knees and lowered his body by bending his body backwards, letting Kamari pass harmlessly. In the same position, Naruto raised his leg, then twisted his body around and kicked Kamari in his abdomen, sending the Ronso flying, much to everyone's surprise. The muscular leonine roared in pain when its back slammed roughly against the nearest tree before falling down to the ground. Attacking me with a hateful attack like that, is this really a test? Naruto asked with a smirk, did I do something to anger you? Kamari only growled in response and pulled the lance from his back. With a silent growl, the blue Ronso thrust the shining spear tip forward, aiming for his throat, but Naruto simply raised his kunai and parried the attack, causing sparks to fly between them before thrusting his fist into the leonine's chest, sending the 6'8" flying back once again. Come on, this is too easy. Naruto yawned as Kamari tried to pick himself up, coughing slightly while holding his chest. You can't seriously think that you can protect Yuna with this kind of strength. Oi, that's too harsh man, Waka spoke up nervously. You wanna try again? Naruto asked Kamari, ignoring Waka's statement. The Ronso growled, holding his weapon at his hip before taking a step back and stabbing the lance into the ground to gain leverage to leap into the air. Naruto's eyes followed Kamari's movement as the Ronso shot down with the tip of his spear aiming at his chest. Naruto. Dodge! Titus shouted when he saw Naruto standing completely still. The next second, the blitzball player and the rest gasped in horror when the spear struck Naruto on his chest. But much to everyone's shock, Naruto suddenly exploded into a cloud of smoke, leaving in his place a wooden log. What? Yuna and the others gasped, while Kamari had his eyes widened in surprise. Surprised. The moment Kamari heard that voice and turned around, he was met with a fist straight to the face, being punched with enough force to slam his body down to the ground, leaving a small crater there. How? How? Waka cried while holding his head. At this point, I don't think I can feel surprised anymore, Lulu muttered while sighing longingly. Have enough now? Naruto asked, but once again the blue Ronso growled in response. Standing up, the leonine roughly pushed Naruto out of the way. The thick white braids that fell at either side of his head swished as Kamari shook his head gravely in disapproval. He turned and marched off further down the path, limping away without a sound. What's with that guy anyway? Naruto asked, crossing his arms over his chest. You really didn't have to do that, you know. Yuna approached him and said that with a frown. Her tone was as soft as always, but he could tell that she was a bit annoyed. Do you know he has protected me since I was a child? Huh? Naruto scratched the back of his head, before remembering the question he asked from before and finally realizing how wrong it was to make that kind of question. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I should apologize to him then. Yuna only shook his head and walked away, following by Waka and Titus. You know, Lulu stopped in front of Naruto and said to him, not many people can overlook the precepts you have broken when you entered Besaid Temple without the right to do so. While you can summon mighty-looking toads, it's clear to us guardians that you're no summoner. Also, at the time, you weren't Yuna's guardians. Do you know that your action could have endangered Yuna's life? Naruto gasped. It was quite fortunate that Yuna had finished her praying and overcome her own trial by the time you entered. After saying that, Lulu walked away, leaving Naruto behind. Did he really endanger Yuna's life, the very same life he promised to protect the moment he became her guardian? Those who don't follow the rules are trash, but those who abandon their friends are worse than trash. He had lived the past few years of his life with that lesson as his motto. He had become trash when he broke the rules to enter Besaid Temple's cloister of trials to make sure that Yuna was alright, but if what Lulu said was true, then by doing so, he had forced her in a worse situation, endangering her life in the process. For the first time ever, Naruto questioned those words, wondering if they were always right. Line break. Pretty soon Naruto noticed the ground under him was gradually becoming sandier the more he advanced. As he passed onto the shoreline, Naruto and the others had finally arrived at the Besaid port, where people from the village fluctuated in all directions. They were mostly crowded around the wooded docked area and looked like they were waiting for them. When they saw them approaching, the villagers made way for them to pass, murmuring words of hope and good fortune to them, disguising the grief in their voices. A number of young children were there also, crying silently as Yuna passed them by. The boat floated on the sea before them, resting against the marina. It was a long wooden vessel that was comprised mostly of a flat plateau that served as a deck. There were rooms below and stairs that led up from the deck to viewing platforms, with a name carved on a burnished red placard, which read, SS Licky. Yuna got on the ship after a few final embraces with the villagers, while Naruto was the last to get on the board. The others' guardians including Kamari and Titus had already gotten on the deck long before him. The people waved desperately when the ship began to slip away, some flooding with tears. Yuna banished their anguish with a soft smile before shaping the Yevon prayer to them, yet her promising smile faltered somewhat as she did so. Her face became gravely composed. Goodbye. In a moment the island faded out of view, leading them to the first destination of their journey. Thank you very much. Naruto grinned and said gratefully as he accepted his lunch, which was a large onigiri rice ball from one of the sailors of the SS. Licky. Said food was one of many things elemental nations and Spira had in common, and while the onigiri was no ramen, he was as hungry as a wolf, so it should be fine for the time being. Removing the silver wrapping around the onigiri, Naruto took a bite and took his seat on a far right side of the deck before removing his backpack from his shoulders. Looking around while doing so, his azure blue eyes fixed onto the frontal tip of the boat, where Yuna was standing with a small crowd gathered around her, smiling radiantly as the young summoner accepted the showers of praise that were directed to her. Everyone was absolutely thrilled to be in her presence, claiming that she would surely defeat Sin. They say that summoners got noble blood. Naruto turned his head around to the other side, see two men chatting amongst themselves eagerly beside him. I heard she's Lord Braska's daughter. The other confirmed energetically. Ya don't say. Lord Braska's daughter, the first of the two men continued, she might just have a chance. We'll get her to Kilika, we will. The two men said loudly with determination before bowing in the Yevon prayer at her direction. Well then, we pray for Lady Yuna's safe passage. They said before scuttling off to another part of the ship. Taking another bite of his food, Naruto put the onigiri away and unzipped the zipper of his backpack. It was Tsunade and Sakura who prepared this backpack for him when he told them the reason he could not return just yet, and they really didn't leave out anything. Reaching his hands inside, Naruto could find 10 scrolls contained a decent amount of ninja tools, 2 scrolls keeping his spare clothes and some spare scrolls for storing. There was also a black jacket with orange stripes folded and put neatly in the middle, as well as a forehead protector with the symbol of his village in the middle. What's this? Naruto voiced his thought out loud when he moved the shirt to the side and saw some unfamiliar scrolls. They must be the reasons why his backpack was heavier than he thought. The scrolls were slightly larger than the others and had different colors, ranging from yellow to blue, as well as orange, his favorite color. However, before he could take out one of them to have a look, he was encompassed by a large shadow that appeared above him. Looking up, Naruto's eyes widened when he saw Kamari standing there with his lance in hand. Surprisingly, before Naruto could say anything, Kamari was the one who opened up first. Kamari wants to talk, he said shortly, referring to himself in third person. Is Naruto free? Oh yeah, of course. Naruto nodded his head and stood up, standing before the tall Ronso with a small smile. "What's up? Is there anything I can help you with?" "Naruto is very strong," he began, saying with the same tone. "Kamari wants to be strong too. Can Naruto teach Kamari how to fight like that?" Naruto widened his eyes again in surprise when he heard that. He wasn't expecting something like that from the Leonine. "Why yeah, I guess." Naruto nodded, scratching the back of his head. "I mean, I'm not sure if I can teach you anything useful, but we can definitely work something out," he said, earning a nod from the Leonine. To begin with, he doubted Kamari or any people of Spira could use chakra, so teaching the Ronso the art of shinobi was out of question. However, he knew that they could improve Kamari's fighting skills by training with each other occasionally. Kamari heard Naruto became Yuna's guardian. The Ronso continued after that. "Yeah, I want to help her with her pilgrimage, protect her and make sure that she's going to come out of this alive." Naruto smiled while nodding his head. "It's not just because I want to repay her and you guys for taking care of me, I just can't sit back or simply go home and leave you guys behind, especially with something I can definitely help you with. Naruto is a good human." Kamari nodded his head firmly before continuing. Kamari also wanted to apologize for Kamari's behavior earlier. I understand why you're so angry at me, and to tell you the truth, I think it's me who should say that." Naruto smiled nervously in response, "For what I said earlier, and for endangering Yuna's life when I broke into Besaid Temple." Much to his surprise, Kamari only shook his head. What Naruto said was true. Kamari cannot protect Yuna with this kind of strength. The Ronso admitted. Also, Lulu told Kamari that Naruto broke in because Naruto was worried for Yuna's safety, but Kamari hopes Naruto would never do something so reckless like that again, for Yuna's sake. "Yeah, I know." Naruto nodded his head, "But now that I'm her guardian, I can come into the temples with her too, right?" Kamari nodded his head. Kamari will see Naruto later. After saying that, the Ronso walked away. Though, Naruto could see him standing not too far away from Yuna, with his arms crossed on his chest and a firm expression on his face. Naruto suddenly realized that despite his frightening appearances, Kamari could be quite gentle and kind-hearted. It's just that he was worried about Yuna's safety, something he must have dedicated to protect with his life. "I see that the two of you are getting along well." Naruto turned his head and saw Lulu approaching him. "I was worried that you two might fight again." "Ah, so you were worried about me?" Naruto asked with a grin while sitting down and reaching his hand into his backpack. "I'm touched." "Don't get used to it," the busty black mage said coolly, making Naruto chuckle. "Kamari acknowledged your strength. It's the first time I have seen him like that." "Well, Yuna's safety, it's all that matter, right?" Naruto shrugged with a question and pulled out a yellow scroll. "What are you doing?" "Check out what this is." Naruto answered as he unrolled the scroll in his hand. "I sent a list to my friends and asked them to prepare this backpack for me. It contains everything I need for myself while staying here, as well as Yuna's pilgrimage." He pointed to the scroll. "This is one of the scrolls one didn't include on the list." "I see, anyway." Lulu then reached her hands into her cleavage, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at her action and magically pulled out two small spheres, which radiated a faint, but noticeable amount of natural energy that Naruto could feel even without Sennin mode. "You forgot to pick these up after you defeated those fiends." "What are these?" Naruto asked when he accepted the spheres from Lulu. "These are Ability Sphere and Power Sphere. Fiends drop them, as well as many random items they stole from people every time they disappear." Lulu answered, pointing her hand to each sphere each time she said its name. Because they looked exactly the same, Naruto had no idea how she was able to tell which one was which. Power Sphere allows you to increase your strength while Ability Sphere let you learn new abilities. They're very useful to increase your abilities and extend your arsenal. "Sound complicated?" Naruto said while shaking his head. "You know what? I think you guys should keep it," Naruto said, tossing the spheres back to Lulu, who had a surprised expression. "They have more uses to you anyway." "Are you sure?" Lulu asked, looking at Naruto as if he had grown a second hand. "Pretty sure." Naruto shrugged, answering casually, "I think I will collect a few of them as trophies or maybe souvenirs for my friends when I return to my home world, so unless only the one who go for the kills can use it, I think you should keep it." He waved the scrolls in his hands around, Plus, I have already had many new techniques to worry about here. Fair enough. The busty black mage nodded her head with a smile, putting the spheres back to her chest. Hey, Naruto. Titus suddenly appeared at his side, holding a blitz ball in his hand and said with a grin, Waka said you could play some blitz ball, want to train with us? Nah, I think I will pass. Naruto shook his head, making the smile on Titus' face drop. Kicking is easy, but playing is hard and the rules are complicated. Ah come on man, it's very easy. Titus immediately brightened up, it's easy and. Then suddenly, before Titus could finish his statement for the fellow blonde, there was a mighty bang that resounded loudly beneath their feet, shocking the ship's crews as well as Yuna, Naruto and the fellow guardians. Everyone on board gasped in shock and horror as the wooden planks under them began to tremble violently. Watch out! Naruto shouted and grabbed Lulu by her hand and Titus by his hood just in time to prevent them from falling over and possibly rolling off the boat as well when it was carried and tipped up by a gigantic wave, without force to knock everyone to their feet. The ocean was taken over by a sudden torrent of explosive rage. Naruto turned his head toward Yuna's direction and widened his eyes when he saw her clinging on for dear life as the ship veered over almost vertically in the tempestuous mass beneath it, completely throwing her and the rest of the passengers off their feet. Go get her, Lulu said loudly when she saw Naruto, who somehow was still standing perfectly still. Don't worry about us. Without the need to be told twice, Naruto rushed toward her direction, jumping over the obstacles before running even faster when Yuna lost the grip on the balcony and toppled down from to the other side of the boat. In a flash, Naruto was there to catch her in his arms and channeled chakra to his feet to prevent both of them from slipping from the ship entirely. You alright? Naruto asked as he looked at her head rested against his shoulder. Yes. Yuna nodded her head when Naruto put her down, looking on with veiled determination. When the ship rebalanced on the sea once again, Kamari ran over to aid them, as did Lulu, Waka and Titus. What's going on? Please tell me it's not what I think it is, Waka said while Naruto could only look on in confusion. Suddenly a huge shape broke the surface of the water as it did so. It was a gigantic dorsal, shark-like fin, completely covered in thick armored scales. A blood-curdling shriek enveloped the ship as the object came into clearer view. Sin. The people screamed in frenzied hysteria as the colossal mass surged past their tiny boat, violently at close quarters. In a blind panic, they rushed around chaotically searching for an escape from the inevitable. Sin. Naruto asked in shock and rushed to the right side of the boat to look at the gargantuan whale-like beast swimming underneath the boat. This fucking thing is Sin. Naruto asked loudly while pointing his hand toward the creature underwater. Sin was nowhere near as big as the Jubi, but still, it was definitely larger than a tailed beast. The hell man, is that really a question to ask right now? Titus shouted back with a deadpanned expression before removing Brotherhood from its scabbard on his back. Sin plunged before them stormily, its monstrously huge form seemed to mock the minute scale of their ship. Oh no, Kilika is at that direction. One of the ship's crews cried out in horror, realizing that Sin was moving away from the island. Our families are in Kilika. Another proclaimed desperately, oh dear Yevon, please don't let anything happen to them. Speed up the ship, Waka cried out to the others, and everyone quickly went to work. Incoming. Naruto shouted out loudly when several projectiles shot out from Sin's fin and landed on the deck, causing the whole ship to shake violently. The shinobi growled as he protected Yuna from an incoming projectile, jumping into the air and kicking it away before it could hit her. Sin spawns. Waka cried out and held the blitzball tightly in his hand when the strange projectiles that came from Sin cracked open, revealing abnormal fiends with a pink head and sharp's claws and two wings that stood straight up from their bodies. Protect the crews. We need to get to Kilika as soon as possible. He shook his head and threw his ball at the closet fiend, knocking it back. The others nodded their heads and took out their weapons. Without the need to think, Naruto took out his weapons and shot to the closest Sin spawns. Jumping into the air, the blonde slashed his weapon down, leaving a deep cut on its body before creating a large Rasengan in his hand, spinning his body around and thrusting it into a fiend that had tried to attack him from behind, blowing it away in a vortex of wind. In a flash, the creatures were completely decimated, but Naruto didn't look at the result, knowing full well what his attacks could do to monsters several times worse than them. and charged at the next fiend, moving with speed that made him nothing but a blur to the people around them. "Oh, K," Waka said slowly as he caught his ball after taking down another fiend with it. "Is he even human?" Titus asked in shock. Brotherhood in hand, he had cut down 2 monsters, but Naruto had already gotten several kills for himself. However, there were still a whole lot aimed for them in the ship's crews, clawing and biting. Out of nowhere another launched up onto his back, but before it could do anything, Naruto spun around and threw one of his kunai at its head, piercing through its body and making it disappear into nothingness. Titus gasped as he turned around and looked at the spheres on the deck, where the monster was. "Keep your eyes open, Titus," Naruto said, moving to the side to dodge a Sin spawn before raising his leg and kicking it away. Looking at Sin, Naruto realized it had already gotten a mile away from them. "I'm going to take care of you later, pal," the blonde said firmly as his eyes hardened, pointing his kunai at the beast that were swimming away and disappearing into the horizon. Naruto then snapped his body around with his hand raised, but before he could do anything, a blazing ball of fire exploded within its body, blasting it away from him. "Keep your eyes open, Naruto," Lulu said as she released her doll, which ran toward the fiend and finished it with a kick. "Don't worry, I got it cover," Naruto said, throwing his last kunai away, killing one without even looking. It didn't take them long to finish the rest of the fiend, and when that happened, Kilika had appeared before them. Then suddenly, before they could approach the port, the ship suddenly shook violently, nearly knocking everyone to their feet. Running to the side, Naruto looked down and saw another fiend swimming underneath the ship. Its shadow reminded Naruto of a gigantic jellyfish. "Another one?" Titus asked as he ran to stand next to Naruto and look down. "This one is big," he cried out when he saw the shadow. "Hey, what are you?" Before he could finish his question, Naruto had already jumped off the ship and dived into the water. "Let's finish this quickly," Naruto thought as he created a Rasenshuriken in his hand. As the large energy shuriken started spinning, the water around him started swiveling around Naruto. From the ship, everyone didn't know what he was doing, but all gasped in shock when they saw a gigantic whirlpool. With a glowing core appeared, pulling the giant fiend toward it. It tried to escape, but Naruto grabbed one of its tentacles and yanked it back before thrusting his technique into its umbrella, sending it away. Yuna and her guardians widened their eyes in shock and gasped in amazement when the water surface was split into 2 as the monster traveled across the ocean before getting swallowed into a gigantic vortex explosion of wind. The vortex disappeared a moment later, and the jellyfish fiend was nowhere to be found. Naruto quickly got out of the water and climbed onto the ship, standing in front of the people who were looking at him in bewilderment and amazement. After a moment of silence, Naruto spoke up with a request. "Can anyone give me a dry towel, please?" Line break. As the ship pulled into the port, Naruto could only stand on the deck and look at the village of Kilika in silence, clenching his fists as he realized how Sin had utterly ruined the beautiful place. Walkways, houses and several ships were smashed to pieces floated all around the demolished village. Even the forest beyond the town showed signs of being damaged beyond recovery. The clear water reflected them as Naruto followed Yuna and the others onto the walkway into the village. 2 villagers, a man and woman, stood at the bottom of the way, waiting for them. With a sad face, Yuna greeted them with the prayer gesture, bowing her head. "Greetings. I am the summoner Yuna. I have come from the temple in Besaid," she told them. Lady Summoner," the villagers greeted, bowing to her. "If there is no other summoner here, please allow me to perform the sending." "Sending?" Naruto turned to Lulu, asking curiously. "You will see," the black mage replied softly, and Naruto nodded his head in response. "Thanks be to ye," the man said with a small, sad smile. The woman, whose eyes were filled with tears, nodded her head. "It's so fortunate to have you here with us, Lady Summoner." "Our loved ones," she murmured, "we feared they would become fiends." Yuna could only manage a sympathy smile while saying comfortingly, "Please, take me to them," she said, gently followed them as they lead her away. Kamari and Lulu also followed without hesitation while Waka was staying behind, surrounded by his teammates. "You're not going?" Titus asked, speaking out Naruto's thought. "We'll go see what we can do to help in town," the red-haired man said hauntingly and hurried off before any of them could ask him another question. "Well, shall we?" Naruto asked, putting a hand on Titus' shoulder. "Yeah, let's go after them." Nodding his head, the two blondes quickly went after Yuna and the other guardians and soon came to a portion of the jetty which overlooked an unobstructed view of the ocean. Many villagers had gathered here and Naruto was able to spot Lulu and their Ronso companion among them. Yuna, meanwhile, was standing in front of them, talking to an elderly woman. Then the two new arrivals noticed it, and while Titus gasped in shock, Naruto could only look with a haunting look in his eyes when he saw what were under the surface of the shallow water beyond the ramp. Countless bodies, wrapped in shrouds and dressed with flowers, floated just below the surface of the crystal-clear water. Naruto looked around, and saw many villagers sobbing and crying. There was no doubt that the ones under the water were their loved ones. Titus wasn't sure what to make of it, so he approached Lulu warily. "What ascending?" He asked quietly so only the guardian in black could hear. "Are we going? Hey. What the hell, man?" Titus cried out in pain when Naruto hit him in the arm, hard. However, when he saw the look in the shinobi's eyes, he wisely kept his mouth shut. Lulu, who clicked her tongue in displeasure, glanced at him scathingly. "You truly are clueless," she said bluntly. "Are you sure it's just your memory that's the problem?" Titus could only make a face. "The dead need guidance," she suddenly continued. The annoyance on her face had disappeared, and replaced with sadness and regret. Looking at her summoner, she continued, filled with grief over their own death, they refuse to face their fate. They yearn to live on, and resent those still alive. She paused before continuing. "You see, they envy the living, and in time, that envy turns to anger, even hate. Should these souls remain in Spira, they become fiends that prey on the living." She then looked at Naruto, and made a small, sad smile. "I don't know how you did it, but the anger and hatred you felt when you fought those fiends at Besaid, those were the emotions of lost souls who didn't receive ascending from a summoner." "I see," Naruto said softly. He didn't know. "It's sad." He could only say, "Yes, it is." Lulu nodded her head with grimly. "The sending takes them to the far plane, where they may rest in peace." Naruto nodded, and returned his attention back to Yuna, who bowed her head to the elderly woman and turned to the front. Holding the staff in both hands, Yuna walked forward slowly and stepped onto the water surface, advancing forward as if she was walking on land. If Naruto weren't someone who could also walk on water, he would have the same expression as Titus, who gasped lightly and looked at Yuna in amazement. She walked flawlessly, each step creating small ripples around her bare feet, and came to a stop in the middle of the graveyard. Smiling sadly as the wind gently trembling through her soft hair, Yuna raised her magic staff out and slowly moved it in a sweeping circle. The sending began, and Yuna danced on the water surface gracefully, turning around while circling her staff. As they watched her, many villagers fell to their knees as they cried bitterly while their friends and their families tried to comfort them. Then Yuna stood straight up, holding her staff with both hands. Yuna bent her back and bowed her head and then elegantly stood up, raising the staff with her before lowering her whole body down, running her hand on the water before swaying her staff round and round in her hands. Then Naruto saw them, the multicolored orbs of light that floated their way up to very surface, drawn to Yuna, who circled again, holding her staff horizontally above her head. Naruto snapped his head to the side when he saw the torches burning brightly, and changing from its natural color to light purple. The orbs followed her movement and they circled around her, forming a swirling fountain beneath her feet and raising her from the surface. Naruto continued to watch in silence as Yuna continued to pirouette in ethereal grace. Each rotation grew in graceful manner, drawing more of the pyre flies from the bodies underwater and leading them into the peace of the afterlife land. He could feel their emotions, sadness, grief, but no anger or hatred. Something stirred from deep within him at that moment as he watched the scene with sadness, feeling an ache grow in his heart. Yuna danced beautifully, but he couldn't help but wonder why something so beautiful should be a ritual for something so sad like this. He remembered his friends. He remembered Neji, and the people who had sacrificed their lives for peace. Where were they now? Were they staying at a place like a farplane too? Perhaps, their souls had moved on. Naruto couldn't stop himself from wondering all those questions. He thought he had seen it all because after all, he had just gone through a bloody war just a few days ago, but at that moment, Naruto realized he hadn't seen anything. Yet, then, in a fading flash, it was over. The water slowly lowered the summoner down. Yuna returned to the ramp, clutching her staff loosely. She looked tired. I hope I did okay, she voiced softly as she halted before her guardian. You did very well, Lulu praised proudly, running her hand through a stray lock of the summoner's hair. They've reached the far plane by now. But, no tears next time, There was nothing wrong with tears. Naruto thought bitterly. He cried when they killed Neji. He cried when he realized how painful it was to fight in a war. Someone like Yuna had every reason to cry. There won't be a next time. He wanted to say those words to Yuna, but decided against it because had already gone through a lot and didn't need more to worry about. No more, Naruto hardened his eyes. Next time he met Sin, he would kill it. Alright guys, listen up. Naruto said loudly as he pointed his finger at the group in front of him. I want you all to split up into groups of 10 and help these people rebuild their home and do whatever they ask you to do. Let's make this place lively for them again, alright? Aye, boss. The army of clones cried out and immediately did what they were told, splitting up into 6 groups of 10s and spreading out all around Kilika Port. Soon, they got to work, doing everything that required some extra strong hands. They fixed the houses, the walkways, moved obstacles out of the ways and many things along those lines. 600 clones should be more than enough, Naruto thought. At the rate they were working, he was sure that the villagers of Kilika Port could return to their daily life in the morning of the next day. Nodding his head, the blonde turned around and saw Yuna and the rest looking at him in shock and amazement, even the usually serious and calm Kamari. Naruto appreciated the attention, but he couldn't help but feel rather uncomfortable under their gazes, so he asked while scratching the back of his head. Is there anything wrong? He asked as if what was happening behind him was the most common thing in the world. Wrong, Titus exclaimed in shock as he gestured both hands toward the Naruto-s. When we asked you how you intended to help them all by yourself, we didn't expect you to create a whole army of yourself, man. Seriously, man, Waka nodded his head in agreement, still having difficulty picking his jaw from the ground. After seeing so many strange things from you, I thought I wasn't going to feel any more surprised. Lulu said, sighing longingly while shaking her head, I guess I was wrong. Just when I thought you had shown us everything, you pulled another trick from your sleeves. She shrugged her shoulder, you will never stop to amaze us, won't you? What can I say? Naruto grinned, I'm unpredictable. Lulu should get used to that feeling, because he had many tricks he hadn't revealed to them yet, but wished that he wouldn't have to anytime soon. So, those people, Yuna asked slowly, are you controlling them or are they, you? They're me, 100%, literally. Naruto answered with a smile, they are called shadow clones. They can think for themselves, eat, and do anything that I can do. Are all shinobi capable of duplicating themselves like that, or is it just you? Waka questioned curiously. Well, I have seen more than just a handful of people using shadow clone. Naruto said thoughtfully, recalling his father, then the second Hokage and much more he had met. It's a very useful technique for training and doing things like this. He said, looking at his clones who were working. I see. Yuna nodded her head. With this, everyone can go back to their daily routines in no time. Thanks, Yevon, that we have you here with us, she said, before bowing her head in the traditional prayer. Well, I don't know who the hell Yevon is, Naruto said, shrugging while grinning smugly, but I'm sure that if he is the one who brought me to this world, I'm pretty sure that he has chosen the right person. He gave them a thumb up and a nice guy grin. Don't worry, Yuna. I'm going to make this pilgrimage as swiftly as possible for you. I have no doubt, Naruto. Yuna smiled, nodding her head. Anyway, it's getting dark. Lulu spoke up as she looked at the sky and then turned to Yuna, we should find some place for you to rest. We will leave for the temple tomorrow. The busty guardian said with a firm tone as if she was daring Yuna to do otherwise. Knowing the summoner, Naruto was sure that she would want to, because before he used his clones to help the villagers, Yuna had been very determined to help them herself in any way she could. It was a reason Naruto had created so many clones when 200 or 300 should be more than enough. He wanted to make sure that they could cover everything so Yuna couldn't find anything to do. Lulu was right. Yuna had already had a rough day, and she needed to take a rest. Yes. Seeing that Naruto and his clones could help them way better than she ever could, Yuna could only nod her head to her guardian. So there is a temple for Yuna to obtain an Aeon on this island. We have talked about this before we left Besaid, and while we were on the ship earlier. Lulu said stoically as she turned to him, "Did you pay attention to what I said?" No. Naruto answered straightly, and while the black-haired woman could only sigh in defeat and the rest shook their heads, Yuna laughed softly at his blank and simple honesty. The group quickly made their ways to a local inn and booked 3 rooms with double beds, which at first didn't cost a single gil because Yuna was a summoner and Naruto was helping everyone outside. Yuna and Lulu would stay in one room, while Waka would stay with Kamari, who Naruto was sure that wasn't going to stay long in his room with the red-haired captain, leaving Naruto and Titus with the last room. Leaving the inn after he had taken a bath, Naruto went to check on his clones and saw and felt while some had disappeared, the rest were still working hard. The villagers were very grateful, some thanked him when he walked past them, and the children really liked him because of his cool trick. Naruto felt really happy at the affections they had for him, and couldn't help but wonder would it be the same feeling everyone had for him once he went back to his world, his home. When Naruto went back to the inn to get something to eat, Lulu appeared on the 2nd floor and quickly made her way down to the hall through the staircase. Seeing Naruto standing with a small package of foods in his hand, the black mage pondered thoughtfully for a second before approaching him. "Hey, Lulu." Deciding to be the one who made the first greeting, he spoke to the woman, raising a hand and flashing her a smile. "What's up? I need to buy some supplies. There will be a lot of strong fiends on the path to the temple in the jungle, so we better come prepared." Lulu said, "Since you're already here, why don't you join me? I can teach you 1 or 2 things about my world," she offered. "Sound good?" Naruto nodded. Putting the food package he bought from the innkeeper into his pocket, the blonde quickly followed Lulu as she walked out of the inn. "So what do we need?" he asked, curiously. "Not everyone heals as fast as you are, so we will need some potions, in case Yuna is tired and cannot use her magic." Naruto nodded in understanding. He had heard about potions before. Yuna had told him that she and everyone had intended to let him use potions to speed up the healing process because her magic couldn't heal him from his more fatal injuries completely. It had been a good thing that it had only taken him 1.5 days to heal, and a few more to recover completely, much to her and everyone's shock. "We also need some antidotes, Phoenix Downs, and—" "Hold on, Phoenix Downs." Naruto interrupted her. "What are they?" "I will show you." Lulu shrugged and the two stopped in front of an elderly woman that looked to be in her late 50s and stood beside a large chest that must be even larger and heavier than her. "Oh, you two are customers, aren't you?" she asked with a smile. My, what a lovely couple you are." "Couple?" Naruto asked confusedly. "I think you're misunderstanding, ma'am," Lulu answered calmly, but the old woman ignored her word. "You two remind me of my old days," she said. "I used to be a beautiful and attractive woman like you, then I met my—" "Ma'am, can we buy some supplies please?" the black mage interrupted coolly. The woman widened her eyes slightly before turning to the chest. "So, what can I get you?" Opening it, she turned her eyes back to them and asked with the same wrinkled smile. "I will need 5 bottles of potion and antidotes, each. I will also have 2 tufts of Phoenix Downs, please." "I see." She took out from the chest 2 tufts of orange feather and gave it to Lulu. "Here you go." Taking the feathers from the merchant, Lulu turned around and showed them to Naruto. "These are Phoenix Down," she explained while putting them into his hands. "If someone is knocked out completely, you just need to throw one of these at them and they will get right back up with half of the strength at their best." Naruto took them and looked at the phoenix feathers carefully. "You should keep them." "Me?" Naruto asked, pointing at himself. "Of course, rather than the fact that you can store them, you're the one with the best chance to be the last man standing. You also have the best aim, even better than Waka, so you can revive us even when we are out of reach." "Oh well, if you say so." Naruto nodded his head in understanding. However, instead of storing them in his scroll, Naruto decided to put them on his porch, because from there, he could take them out quickly. "Here are your potions," the elderly merchant said as she handed Lulu 5 vials of a clear, bright green liquid, and the antidotes. 3 tiny bottles of a pearly, off-white substance came out next from the depth of her chest. Accepting the items, Lulu took out the necessary gil to pay for the items and gave them to Naruto, who then sealed all of them into his second scroll, which he decided to name Item Scroll, because he would only store everyone's supplies inside from then on. that's some interesting magic you have there, young man. The woman commented while looking at Naruto, is there anything else you need? She asked both of them. Do you sell weapons? Lulu asked curiously. Of course, I sell weapons, but I am afraid that the choices are rather limited. The merchant nodded her head. What do you need? Do you have dolls? The black mage asked in interest, can I take a look at what doll you have? You know, Naruto spoke up while the merchant was taking out the dolls, I still have no ideas why you choose to fight with dolls. He had seen Lulu dropping her doll to the ground and letting it fight instead of casting her black spells, but it couldn't do much damage to the fiends. In his opinion, the doll was only there to piss the enemies off. It's because they are the best type of weapon for black mages. Lulu answered, much like the other weapons, holding a doll in my hand can give me the ability such as piercing to damage fiend with strong armor, or grant us an advantage by putting them to sleep with a single strike, or simply raise my magic as a black mage, allowing me to deal more damages with the same spells. Oh, I think I get it now. Naruto grinned, man, why didn't you explain that when I asked you the first time? Seriously, I thought you liked to play with dolls or something like that. Where did you even have that kind of idea anyway? She asked nonchalantly, looking at the dolls the woman had put on the chest. I saw Waka using his blitzball to fight. Naruto shrugged. At least the blitzball was extremely durable and could use as a weapon, I thought you were just like him. Point taken. Lulu stated before pointing at the doll in the middle, which looked like a cactus, I will take this one. A very wise choice. The merchant smiled, this would be 250 gil. Lulu gave her the money and picked the doll up, holding it in her hands, I believe I can keep this one. She said, moving it away from Naruto's hands when he reached his hand out for it, thinking that she wanted him to seal it away too. Hehe, sorry. Naruto chuckled before asking, so, what does it do? I can use sensor ability with it. She said and sighed when he saw his confused face, with this ability, I can reveal the elemental characteristics and status effects of a target. I can also see its current health and strength. From there, I can determine how much damage it can take and how many attacks do we need to use to take it down. Damn, that's some useful ability right there. Naruto stated in amazement before pointing at himself, hey, why don't you test that on me? See how powerful I am and how many hits I can take before I go down. Okay. No harm done I guess. Lulu shrugged and used the ability the doll, Cactar Scope, gave her on Naruto, making her eyes shone for a second. The next instant, she took a step back and nearly dropped her doll because of what she saw. Naruto's stats were, literally, completely insane. She had never seen anyone or anything like him. He had so many nature elemental characteristics, some she had never seen before. Naruto was also immune to almost all kinds of negative status effects. He didn't have any weakness against any elements, and she didn't feel surprised when she saw auto regen on him. Meanwhile, his health was also totally off the chart. What she was seeing made her question the education she had when she was younger because she didn't know that kind of number actually existed. Lulu gulped. Unless her eyes were fooling her, Naruto Uzumaki could be the strongest being she had ever seen in her life. Was he stronger than Sin? She didn't know, but she was sure that he was way stronger than an Eon summoned by a powerful summoner, which was near impossible because Eons were supposed to be stronger than any human. It was Eons that had the power to defeat Sin, while no human could. Was he even human? What exactly was he? So, what do you see? Naruto asked eagerly. How strong am I? You are strong, she answered, curtly. That's it? Naruto asked. His shoulders dropped. He was expecting Lulu to say something cooler than that. So, how many hits can I take before I go down? 1. Naruto's jaw dropped in shock. 1 hit between the legs is enough to take you down. Hey, I didn't mean that. Naruto said, taking a step back cautiously. You asked me how many hits, didn't you? Lulu then noticed the smile on his face and couldn't help but ask, what's with the smile? I didn't know you could make a joke. You're just so serious all the time. Naruto answered truthfully, putting his hands into his pockets, glad to know that you're still a normal human being, Lulu. The black-haired woman put a hand on her hip before saying, get used to it. She wanted to say she wasn't really joking when she told him a hit between his legs were enough to take him down, but decided against it and said something nicer to him. Oh hell yeah I will. Naruto grinned as the two returned their attentions to the elderly merchant, only to see her smiling at both of them. It's good to be young and in love, isn't it? She asked with a smile, and Lulu could only sigh in response. So, do you need anything else? I have a magic rod for the summoner right here, she said, raising a magic staff from her chest. Unfortunately, Yuna's current weapon is more useful than this one. Lulu answered while shaking her head. I cannot decide for the others, so we will bring her and the rest here tomorrow. All right then. The old lady nodded her head and returned the rod back to the chest. After that, Lulu and Naruto took their leaves, returning to the inn where they were greeted by the Besaid Aurochs, Titus and its captain Waka. As Lulu went back to her room, Naruto stayed behind to grab a decent dinner from the innkeeper before heading back to his room as well. Later that night, Naruto curled up in his bed at the inn, mindlessly thinking about his friends at home. He missed Konoha, he missed its people, but above all, he missed his friends. But he couldn't return to them, not right now. He had so many things to do, a girl to help, a world to protect. At the moment, Sin could be destroying another village, ruining someone's life. Somewhere, more people and children were crying because Sin had taken their loved ones away from them, just like what he had done this morning. Titus returned to the room much later that night and quickly went to sleep. Naruto's clones had also disappeared, so the blonde closed his eyes and soon drifted to the dreamland as well. Line break. Morning came early. The sky was clear and blue, the air was warm and balmy, just as one would expect from a tropical island like Kilika. By the time Naruto, Yuna and everyone had woken up at 6, the port had been rebuilt and life had returned to its people. There were still sadness and griefs in their eyes, because of the loss of their loved ones, but from what he had heard, the people were all grateful for Yuna's sending ceremony and glad that the deaths had made it to the far plane in peace. Hey, guys. Naruto spoke up as he approached Yuna and the others, who were standing beside a set of stone makers. Yuna and Kamari stood to the side of the path, but Lulu stood separately from them, her lips pursed slightly in annoyance. Titus and Waka arrived shortly after him. What's going on? He asked curiously, looking at Lulu, whose eyes were fixed on the two blitzball players. Yuna is saying she wants Titus to come with us, she said carefully, turning to Titus. Huh. The young man pointed at himself in confusion. Yuna answered with a nod of her head. I want to ask you to be my guardian. Yuna, what are you talking about? Waka said in surprise as he walked over to her. This is not the time for jokes, ya. He stood behind her, looking over at Titus. The boy may be a blitzball whiz kid but up against fiends, he's a newbie. I had never fought fiends before coming to this world. Naruto raised his hand, but a glare from Lulu was enough to put it down. Just want to point that out. Not a guardian then, it's just, he fought against fiends and sinspawns with us yesterday. It has something to do with the fact that he is Sir Jecht's son, hasn't it? Lulu asked, crossing her arms under her ample breasts, which Naruto thought it was going to burst out from the bodice she was wearing. Not being a pervert like his late arrow teacher or anything, it's just they were too eye-catching. Can't this wait till later? We need to go to the temple, she reminded. She lowered her head and bowed her head. My apologies, she said, her voice low. With that, they headed down the path, making their way through the forest and to the temple located on the far side of the woods north of Kilika. Because it was a tropical forest, Naruto couldn't see anything between the giant trees and overgrown bushes, but he could feel almost everything around them, including the fiends that were waiting for an opportunity to attack them. The journey was uneventful for the first 10 minutes. They traveled swiftly through the forest with no accidents, but the peace didn't last long because when they reached an intersection in the path, they were ambushed by something that jumped out from behind the trees. A rotund, mint-colored creature burst out from the brush and began to spray with a volley of tiny, hard seeds. Here you go. While the others evaded, Naruto caught two in his hands before throwing it back to the fiend with the same if not even greater speed than before, knocking it back and effectively stopping it from continuing its onslaught. Stand behind me, Yuna, he said to the summoner, who clenched her magic rod tightly in her hand and nodded her head before giving him a small smile. He had been taught that a medic should never stand on the front lines, and Yuna's white magic made her an excellent healer of the team. Protecting Yuna was his top priority, not just because he was her guardian, but also because in critical situations, the lives of his friends could be in her hands. Kimari. Lulu called out, "Why don't you use Lancet on it?" Naruto looked at Kimari in interest, as the tall Ronso stood in front of his opponent. Kimari unleashed a cry, his energy flared around his body, and caused streams of bright strips of light burst from the fiend and soared over to the Leonine, who absorbed them into his chest. Narrowing his eyes, Kimari nodded at the creature as if he was thanking it for the knowledge, and he demonstrated his new ability. "Watch this," Waka said as Kimari raised his muscular arms in the air, and in one quick motion, he brought his fists down in front of him and shot an enormous seed from his chest. It smacked straight into the fiend, which withered and dispersed into fireflies immediately from the strong impact. "Damn, that's cool," Naruto commented. "Normally, it's a skill that weakens enemies and heals the users as well as replenishes their strength." Lulu explained, but when a Ronso uses it, they can sometimes learn the fiend's abilities. "Ah, I see then." Titus nodded his head and sheathed Brotherhood back to the scabbard on his back. After that, the party moved further down the path, weaving their way through the tall trees, dodging any fiends that tried to ambush them. With Naruto's sensor ability, it was easy for them to do so, but still, they decided to take down some of them to collect spheres to become stronger. By the time they arrived at another intersection, Naruto's scroll was half full with spheres of all kind. Before they could get anywhere, two young men from the Crusaders, an organization of volunteer warriors who pledged their lives to defend the people of Spira against the terror of sin, appeared and stopped them by blocking their path. "Company, halt!" the shorter one cried as he stood before them. The group stopped walking, a little puzzled by them. "You want trouble, pal?" Naruto asked threateningly as he stood at the front of the group, facing the two directly. "What's the problem, Lusu?" Waka asked as he stepped up. Lusu, the taller crusader, stepped ahead of his companion and pointed behind him. "Can you see that?" They peered past the crusaders and widened their eyes slightly at what they saw. Only a few yards away from them was a giant fiend, which stood thrice as tall as Kimari, the tallest among them, and had a large, round, and plant-like body with skin like purple bark. It had a leafy green skirt growing around the base of its body, and long branch-like arms that spotting out from its sides and up into the air, with large claws dangling high above its head. Its front body split open from top to the bottom to reveal rows of tiny sharp teeth and a gargantuan mouth. "That fiend before us is Ocha, Lord of the Wood," Lusu informed them. "We've had trouble with this one before. Remember, discretion is the better part of valor." "Thank you for your warning," Lulu lowered her head. "So, do you want to take it down or circle around it and try another way?" Naruto asked curiously. He bet that he could take it down smoothly, but then again, that monster looked tough and he still had much to learn about the fiends of Spira. He couldn't just send a Rasenshuriken or something as strong as toward it either. The destructive power of his technique could level an entire part of the forest and destroy the nature would be the last thing he would want to do. "I think we should take the way." Yuna decided to interrupt Waka's suggestion with a firm tone. "I think we can take it. There will be many people coming and going from the temple today, I want to make the path safe for them." "The Ocha is no garden variety fiend," Lusu said seriously. "We could throw 100 crusaders at it and still lose. Good thing I am a one-man army." Naruto pointed out with a grin as he approached Ocha. "I can be 200 or 300 in a second, so don't worry about that, we can take them on just fine." He continued confidently when he saw the way the crusaders were looking at him. "So be it then," Lulu said finally after realizing that Naruto and Yuna weren't going to give up. "But be careful, Ocha poison is one of the fastest and most painful ways to get to the far plane. For some reason, I really don't like the sound of that." Naruto chuckled nervously. He had dealt with poisons in the past, and while Kurama could burn them all away and keep him alive, having deathly poisons in his system wasn't something he wanted in a regular basic, coward. Naruto commented when he saw Lusu and his friend running away. "Is everybody ready?" Lulu asked quietly as she moved forward, holding her magic doll at her hip. Nodding their heads, everyone took out their weapons and prepared for their toughest battle yet. At first, the giant fiend didn't seem to notice their presences. But when Waka's shoes made a crunching sound when he stepped on small rocks on the ground underneath him, Ocha shuddered as though it had been startled, and as it screeched like a wild animal, the fiend raised all four of its arms. Without wasting a second, Lulu She raised her arm and cast her spell, causing an explosion of fire to appear in the center of the monster. It shrieked in pain as a part of its body was burned away, and the Ocha returned the favor by whipping its vine-like arms at her. She braced for the impact, but Naruto immediately leapt forward and took Lulu with him, avoiding the attack before landing on the ground. A thank you should be nice, Naruto smirked as he put the black mage down, who dusted her dress. I have it covered, she blankly replied. Suit yourself. Naruto grinned as he threw a kunai with an explosive tag one of the veins, blasting it away in a strong explosion. Waka spun around and threw his blitzball toward the Ocha, smashing it in its lower jaw, but Naruto felt like it could do much damage. Kamari and Titus joined in by swiping their weapons at its limbs, shielding Waka as he caught his ball in hands. Waka, don't! Lulu suddenly shouted when the blitzball captain was about to throw his ball once again, but this time, it had a dark cloud around it. Save your energy, Ocha is only vulnerable to fire element attack. Naruto turned to look at her and saw her eyes shining brightly. She was using sensor, he thought. Naruto wished he could use that ability too. Everything could have been a lot easier if he knew his enemy's weaknesses and strength. The black mage cast her spell fire once more and combined with Naruto's explosive kunai, they managed to deal some heavy damages to the giant plant fiends, but the monster looked like it was not going to go down anytime soon. Then suddenly, when Titus stepped forward to attack, the Ocha swung its arms again, catching him square in the chest before sending him flying back several feet. Titus cried out in pain as he tried to stand his ground, but quickly realized he was going to get more than just a bruise. His skin darkened where he'd been struck, and he looked down to see it growing a very angry red with a mixture of green. It didn't take the poison long to full affect his body, as his vision started blurring and Titus felt the world around him spinning like a top. Oh no, he has been poisoned. Waka called out as he dodged a vein by jumping. Can anyone give him an antidote? I have one. Naruto took out one and made his way toward Titus. However, Lulu decided to stop him. No, you do it, Yuna. The summoner nodded her head as she raised her staff, Uzisuna. When Yuna brought her staff down, she engulfed Titus in a quick flash of light, and much to Naruto's amazement, the green part of his chest had disappeared. Yuna cast her magic once again, and in a flash, Titus' injury disappeared, leaving him as good as new. Phew, I thought I was done for, Titus said as he rubbed the spot where he had been injured. That's awesome, Yuna. Naruto gave her a thumb up. Thank you, Naruto. Yuna smiled gratefully as she lowered her head, but then she widened her eyes in shock before crying out loudly when she saw a vine arm attacking Naruto from behind. Watch out. With the same smile, Naruto simply jumped into the air and flipped his body backwardly, making the arm pass him harmlessly. Don't worry, I have it covered. Naruto grinned, giving Yuna a thumb up as she breathed out in relief. After a moment of taking hit after hit from them, the Ocha shuddered and sunk closer to the ground. Its arms hung lower and a spray of light green mist began to emanate from the claws at the ends. At first, Naruto thought they had won, but when he realized it wasn't going to disappear like the other fiends, he knew it was up to something. What's it doing? Titus asked, confused. It's sleeping. Waka answered with a puzzled expression. It's regenerating. Lulu immediately corrected him as she pointed to one of the cuts Titus had left on its body that was disappearing slowly. The arm that Naruto had blown away was also growing back as well. Quick, we have to take it down before it can fully restore. The others nodded their heads and charged at the fiend. It's vulnerable to fire, huh? Naruto asked thoughtfully, maybe I can use some fiery help. You there, Matabi? He asked the two-tailed Biju, whose consciousness appeared in his mind after hearing his call. At first, Naruto thought his connections with the other tailed beasts had been served because he was staying in a different world, but to his relief, it was only temporary. The reason he couldn't see any tailed beasts in his mindscape was rather simple. It was because they had been busy finding places to settle down as soon as they were released from their prisons, which had been created by Sasuke. It was the first time in a very long time they were free from the human, and they had decided to enjoy it as much as they could before contacting him. They were still telepathy linked to each other. He didn't know how it was possible but decided to leave that matter for later. Having a fight already, aren't you? The demonic cat replied with a nod of her head. All right, I'm ready when you are. He had never used the other Bijuu's chakra and power outside of Rasengan before, but he was sure that he could use them the same way their previous hosts had used them. Fortunately for Naruto, he had already seen them using their Bijuu's powers during his fight against them while they were still under Obito's control, so he knew what to do, basically. "Let's do it," Naruto muttered as he lowered his body down and put one hand on the ground while raising the other at his side, with bluish aura flaring from his body, which soon solidified and took the form of burning blue flame. Naruto shot forward, ignoring the shock and amazed look the others were giving him, and punched Ocha's torso with his flaming fish, causing it to screech in pain while being sent back a few feet. However, unlike Lulu's fire spell, the hellish flame around the part that had caught fire didn't disappear, and continued to burn into its body and spread like fire on hay. Angrily, the Lord of the Wood slashed its vain arms at Naruto, only for the blonde to swiftly dodge by jumping before slashing both hands horizontally to the sides, sending a sharp, claws-like hot flame toward Ocha's arms, cutting and burning them down in the process. Landing on the ground, Naruto pushed his foot and then charged forward with blinding speed, using its body to jump into the air. When he reached the maximum height, Naruto created a Rasengan in his hand, before gathering the fire on his body around it, creating a flaming spiraling orb. Falling down, Naruto then slammed the orb down the top of the fiend's head, creating a vortex of blue fire that allowed him to tear and burn his way through its giant body. In a matter of seconds, Ocha was finished, and when Naruto's feet touched the ground, it exploded in pyre flies and several abilities and speed spheres fell to the ground. "Rest in peace, everyone," Naruto muttered as he looked at the colorful orbs that were flying away. "Dude." Titus suddenly appeared at his side while crying out excitedly, throwing one arm around his shoulder. "That was amazing." "Thanks." Naruto grinned, scratching the back of his head. "And you surprised us, once again." Lulu stepped closer and said with a sigh, "Maybe next time you should hold back a little and leave some for us. You are making this too easy for all of us, you know." "Well, sorry about that." Naruto chuckled. "Who care about that? With a power like this, we can get Yuna to finish her pilgrimage and defeat Sin in no time," Waka stated with the same excitement Titus had. "Yes," Yuna stated softly as she approached him with Kamari, "You're so strong, Naruto." "Hey, strong guardians ensure a safe journey for you, doesn't it?" Naruto grinned at her. He then turned his head to see Lusu and Gata approaching them. "Look who is back." "Whoa," they said in astonishment as he stopped in front of the party, staring at the spot where Ocha used to stand in disbelief. "Everyone is strong," Gata exclaimed before turning to his superior. "Sir, I think we should fight too." "We'll get our chance soon enough," Lusu laughed before turning to Yuna and her guardians, a summoner and her guardians. Lusu said with a smile, "You guys are very impressive. It was Naruto who defeated Ocha." Yuna corrected them while shaking her head, "We didn't do anything." "But Lady Yuna, a strong guardian only follows a strong summoner." The tall crusader smiled, nodding his head. "With this, the path is clear, you guys and everyone can safely travel to the temple this way." Biting the party goodbye, Lusu and his companion crossed the bridge once more, but Gata's enthusiasm still showed. "Young crusaders gather round," he sang as he jogged ahead of Lusu again. "We'll beat Sin into the ground." "Say the guy who ran as soon as Ocha was provoked," Naruto commented. "He's young, but enthusiasm. Cut him some slack, will you?" Waka chuckled before motioning ahead. "Come on, it's not far now." And with that, their journey continued. The journey to Kilika Temple continued. Soon they crossed a second bridge, after which there was a considerably long flight of stone steps for them to climb. They were nothing compared to the next set of stairs, however. "So, the temple is up there, right?" Naruto asked, putting one hand above his eyes to block the sun as he looked up. "That's right. We're very near." Lulu nodded her head. "Come on," Waka chuckled as they began to climb the steps with a little less enthusiasm than the blitzball captain. "I know you guys are all in shape. This won't be too hard." They had climbed up 2 sets of stairs when they bumped into Dato and Jasu, the Aurochs players, who were stretching and preparing. They looked like they were in good shape. Naruto couldn't help but wonder how they had gotten to these steps before him and everyone, but remembered that there had been many paths and they had had to take care of Ocha, the Lord of the Wood. "These stone steps have a history, you know." Waka said cheerfully as he suddenly stopped, looked up at the rest of the stairs with burning determination. Lord Ohalland trained here at his peak. Are you saying the guy who was both a summoner and a blitzball player? Naruto took a wild guess, since Waka had never told him the man's name. That's right. Waka nodded his head. Titus groaned in boredom, but it did not escape the ears of the aurochs. Dato and Jasu began to snigger at him as they continued to do light workout and stretch their bodies, making the blonde player scoff at them before having an idea in his mind. Why don't we have a race? He challenged Waka's teammates, who looked at each other before smirking. They nodded their heads in approval, and stood up straight, narrowing their eyes at Titus like rivals but grinning like fans. Think you can beat me? Titus asked them as he approached. The aurochs plus Titus simply laughed in response as they all lined up at the base of the next flight of stairs. Even Waka lined up, a cheeky smile on his face. Hey Naruto, why don't you join us? He turned his head around, asking the shinobi. Please, we all know that I can beat you with one foot always staying on the ground. Naruto stated cheekily, reminding them of his speed. The winner is going to get all the gil. The blonde said, laughing evilly. For some reason I suddenly have a bad feeling about this. Titus and the other blitzball players chuckled nervously as he looked at Naruto, suddenly feeling less enthusiastic. Yuna, if you would. Naruto turned to the beautiful summoner, gesturing her to give the signal for them. Yuna looked at him unsurely at first, but hurried forward slightly in front of them. Ready, she shouted loudly and enthusiastically, raising her arm above her head. She stood like that a moment as the boys waited eagerly for her call. However, instead of saying anything, Yuna dashed up the stairs on her own, giggling loudly as she left everyone behind. Hey, hey, Waka exclaimed in surprise, and the aurochs plus Titus quickly chased after her, laughing. Lulu sighed and shook her head while saying, kids. She then looked at Naruto, who didn't run after them and was still standing in his place. Why didn't you follow them? We all know that I am going to win anyway. Even when they are one step to the finish line, I am still more than capable of making there before them. Naruto said, putting his hand on his hips. Plus, he had no money, so he didn't have to worry about losing. Still, he hoped Yuna would win, because she looked like she was enjoying herself. So, you are that fast huh? Lulu asked curiously. Naruto's stats didn't display anything about speed, but his evasion was beyond imagination, and she could tell how fast he was just by looking at him fight. Yeah, Naruto nodded as he, Lulu and Kamari slowly made their ways to the top. Is it pure speed or technique? Both, Naruto answered simply. For someone so young, you sure are strong, maybe even stronger than all of us here. Lulu said and Kamari nodded his head silently in agreement. How old are you anyway? 18, 19, 16, actually. Naruto shook his head, making Lulu widen her eyes in surprise. Even Kamari had a look of surprise on his face when he heard Naruto. I thought Yuna had already told you guys that. When he described his world to Yuna, he had also told her his age. Aside from the beauties of elemental nations, or at least how it had been before the Fourth Shinobi War, he had left mostly everything out, but personal information like that was something he could give everyone every day. We didn't care much about you to ask Yuna your age. Lulu replied. So, you do now? Naruto asked, smiling at the busty black mage. You're Yuna's guardians now. Lulu answered, it's only natural for us to get to know you more. Aside from the fact that he came from another world called Elemental Nations, Lulu had to admit that she and everyone knew nothing about him, because apparently, he kept many things for himself. There were many questions she wanted to ask, mainly about his powers, but as someone who was silent and undemonstrative, she respected his privacy and would never ask for his secrets unless he decided to tell them. I guess, fair enough. Naruto shrugged with his trademark grin. The stairs continued to carry higher and higher, and from his position, Naruto could see the jungle as well as the beautiful ocean that spread out in the distance. Kilika in particular and Spira in common, were no elemental nations, but the beauties of their natures were still the sights to behold. But the quiet and peace didn't last long, because the moment they reached the top, a scream suddenly cut through the air. Dato and Jasu appeared and raced back down the stairs with fear visible on their faces. Look out. Dato cried as they disappeared behind them. Waka, who had his blitzball in hand, appeared before them and beckoned the three to follow him. everyone, quick. He urged before informing them, Sinspawn. Nodding their heads, they took out their weapons and prepared for battle. Being the one with the greater speed, Naruto shot forward and spot the fiend Waka was talking about. It was big, round in shape, appeared to be a giant steely gray shell and had two large hands with tentacles like fingers emerging from the ground. Yuna and Titus stood in front of the fiend, weapons in hands, and both had nervousness and determination on their faces. You know what? Why don't you guys take care of this? Naruto suggested with a grin, giving them a thumb up. I will support everyone from behind, just to make sure. The Guardians looked at him for a moment before nodding their heads in understanding. Alright, let's show the ninja of another world what we can do. Waka exclaimed as he sent his blitzball flying at the monster with a powerful throw. However, much to his surprise and Naruto's expectation, the ball harmlessly bounced off of the shell and returned back to the red-haired captain. We've gotta get that shell open. Waka said loudly. You two, stand back. I can weaken it with fire magic. Lulu shouted and raised her hand into the air, creating a fiery explosion on the shell of the Sinspawn. However, before it could leave any damage, the writhing fingers whipped the air above it, and suddenly the explosion was gone as if it was never there. The tentacles can absorb any magic cast at its body. She pointed to the tentacles with her free hands. We need to get rid of them first. Let's do this, Titus, Kamari. Waka said as he gripped his ball again. Keep your eyes on that shell. Both got the message, and charged at the whipping tentacles. Titus attacked first, and quickly stepped out of the way to make room for Kamari, who slashed his spear up as soon as he reached the hand, which then went limp. Before they could continue, the hand on the right whipped its long fingers in Kamari's direction, gazing him on the shoulders as he dodged. Waka quickly jumped in and threw his ball at any tentacles that tried to attack Titus and Kamari, protecting them as they dashed forward and stabbed their weapons into the fiend's flesh, making it wither away. Everyone, it's open. Yuna informed them as the shell began to tremble. It opened ever so slightly, but before Lulu could attack, a pale green fog was released around them. Everyone quickly covered their faces with their sleeves, but Waka was not so lucky. He coughed loudly and fell to his knees. It's poisonous. He gagged. No, Yuna, I got him. Naruto shouted to the summoner when she was about to remove her hands from her face as he rushed at Waka, who went green and fell down to the ground. The poison was hurting him just as much as it hurt the blitzball captain, but it didn't take it long for Kurama's chakra to remove it from his system. Removing one antidote vial from his pocket, Naruto caught him before he could touch the ground and poured the liquid into his mouth. The antidote took effect immediately. It didn't take it long for the color to return to Waka's face. Thanks, Naruto. Waka stood up, holding his chest and thanked him. Damn, this is one hell of a powerful antidote. Naruto commented in amazement as he looked at the empty bottle in his hand. Sakura and Ba-chan is going to love this. Keeping her hand over her face, Lulu looked at Naruto as he regrouped with them. What she had seen had been proven. Naruto was completely immune to poison. It was terrifying, to say the least, when something could knock a full-grown, healthy athlete like Waka down in a second, didn't even have an effect on him. Snapping her head back, Lulu cast her magic, fire, at the fiend. A part of the shell exploded and sizzled, appearing to melt the hard carapace a little. Titus took his opportunity and dashed forward, swinging his blade at the shell, but Brotherhood immediately bounced back, leaving a tiny chink in the shell and knocking him off balance. He exclaimed, "My sword doesn't work. The shell is still too hard. It's no good." Naruto called, "Normal attacks are not going to hurt it. Save your strength, because you guys will need more firepower than that to penetrate the shell." He then turned to the girl who stood next to him. "Yuna, summon your Aeon." "All right." She nodded and looked at the fiend with her eyes burned with determination. "Everyone, stand back." The Guardians did what they were told, giving room for Yuna to perform her summoning ritual. Taking a deep breath, Yuna then spread her arms before bringing her staff back, causing a large magic circle to appear on the ground. 4 pillars of light flew to the sky, joining together to call forth Valifor, whose mighty roar echoed through the air as she descended down from the sky. Spreading her mighty wings, the Aeon slowed herself before landing gently beside Yuna and giving her a gentle nudge with her beak. "Thank you," Yuna said softly as she touched Valifor's head with a grateful smile. "Please fight with us." Valifor lowered her head before snapping around and looking fiercely at the fiend. Sizing the Sinspawn up, Valifor swooped down on the fiend, attacking with her sharp talons. The Sinspawn let out another cloud of poison, but as a powerful spiritual being, Valifor was not affected. She attacked viciously, before flapping her wings strongly, sending a powerful force at the creature and causing the shell to snap open. "Now is our chance," Lulu announced loudly. "Everyone, finish it." Titus and Kamari charged, slashing at the tentacles while stabbing at the creature's body. Waka threw his blitzball, hitting the fiend on one of its jaws, and Lulu cast her black spell at its head, causing it to howl in pain. Valifor let loose a loud roar and plunged her long talons into the belly of the beast. Yuna and the Guardians kept attacking like that for a while, before the fiend finally howled in pain. Poisonous fog poured from its mouth, making the party shield their noses and mouths as they held their breath and watched the life fading from the creature. It didn't take it long for the monster to fade away, releasing pyre flies from its body. "Yes," Titus exclaimed as he sat down heavily, sighing in relief. "Being a guardian is so tiring." Titus replied, getting his breath back. Waka laughed while scratching the back of his head. "Sorry about that. Hope to break you in a little slower." "Hey, you're not half bad," Naruto commented as he offered the young man a hand. "It takes time and a lot of hard work to become a strong warrior, you know," he said, pulling Titus to his feet. "Nah, I think I will pass." Titus grinned. "So what are these Sinspawn anyway?" "They are fiends that fall from Sin's body and are left behind in its wake," Lulu explained calmly. "Leave them alone and Sin comes back for them." After saying that, she walked away, not waiting for Titus to say or ask anything in response. Waka explained, following the mage onward. "You gotta be quick." "I see," Naruto nodded his head in understanding. "How touching. Maybe next time you guys should let me handle them. I'm fast." Waka only shrugged his shoulders with a smile. The journey to Kilika Temple continued, and fiends continued to ambush them from the jungle. Because Yuna and the others were rather fatigued after that intense battle with the tentacles fiend, Naruto stepped forward and took care of most of them, giving his friends time to recover. "So, Titus, they got fiends in Zanarkand, too?" Waka suddenly asked Titus, looking back over his shoulder. "Just a few," Titus replied. "It's a big deal when one shows up, though," Titus answered before coming to a stop, widening his eyes in surprise. "Hey, since when have you believed me about Zanarkand, anyway?" he exclaimed, looking at Waka, who had stopped a moment ago and was now standing behind him. Waka lowered his eyes. "I have been thinking," he began, walking up without looking at anyone. "Maybe people Sin gets to don't die." He stopped at the top of the stairs, scratching the back of his head. "Maybe Sin carries them through time. Like 1,000 years through time. And then, one day, maybe they just pop back, see?" There was a sad, yet hopeful tone in Waka's voice. For a moment, nobody said anything. A scoff from Lulu broke the silence. "Amazing," she spoke up dryly while shaking her head in disbelief. "Simply amazing. You make up one theory after another, refusing to face the simple truth." She turned around and walked past Waka. "Sin didn't take Chapu anywhere," she stated, pausing beside him. "Sin crushed him and left him on the Jose shore. Your brother won't just pop back." Yuna looked frantically from Lulu to Waka and back. "And there's one more thing, Waka," Lulu said as she walked away. "No matter how much you want it, no one can take Chapu's place." Her icy words actually seemed to drop the temperature of the air, and Titus couldn't bear to look at Waka. That last part resonated with Titus especially. "No one can replace Serject, for that matter," she said, turning around. Waka sat down heavily at the top of the staircase, looking out over the jungle. "And there's no replacement for Lord Braska, either. It's pointless to think about it, and sad." With that, Lulu resumed her ascent, this time not looking back. Once it was clear that Lulu had finished talking, Naruto, Yuna and Kamari hurried up the stairs behind her. The other two followed quietly soon after. Kilika Temple came into view when Naruto was taking the last few steps. The temple was larger than the temple at Besaid, with a courtyard just outside the temple doors. The building was made of hard gray stone, with the walls and columns all covered in intricate carvings. The roof was exotically styled with a red-colored stone, and in the middle of the courtyard was a glass floor with a large fire burning warm beneath it. There weren't many people around, but Naruto wasn't surprised, considering Sin's attack just recently. Some of the villagers from the demolished town were scattered around the place. Much like the Aurochs, they came to pray, but they prayed for their loved one and for Sin to never return to their home. As they approached the temple, 3 men wearing purple and gold blitzball uniforms came running out and stopped in front of them. The leader, Naruto assumed, was a muscular redhead wearing a purple headband. He walked straight up to Waka, a smirk spreading across his smug face. "You are here to pray for victory, too?" Waka asked the leader, his voice almost trembling. "Us. Pray. Don't be ridiculous." The leader chuckled confidently, "Who needs to pray? The Luca goers always win." Naruto asked, "Then why are you guys here anyway?" "We've been praying for some competition this year," answered one of the other members mockingly. The leader smirked again. "So, what's your goal this time? You gonna do your best again?" His teammates laughed as he shook his head. "Huh. It's too bad your best isn't good enough. Why even bother showing up?" Titus seemed like he had had enough. Stomping his foot on the ground, he stated confidently, "This time, we play to win," he said, and the Aurochs nodded their heads in agreement. The leader of the goers rolled his eyes. "Ooh, play away. Just remember even kids can play, boys." The Luca goers strode past the Aurochs and Guardians, strutting their way across the forum and disappearing down the stairs. "See you in the finals," Waka called after them, but they only laughed before disappearing. "What a bunch of asshole," Naruto commented, crossing his arms. He had never liked bullies. He then turned around and followed Yuna and the rest into the temple, which looked very similar to the Besaid temple. Statues of high summoners, including statues of Yuna's father, lined the circular room, and in the middle, directly opposite the entrance was the door that would lead them to the Cloister of Trials. The bright flames illuminated the room with a flickering dark orange glow. Naruto looked around. There were only a couple of people in here besides them, and based on their outfits, he could tell that they were blitzball players who came to pray. Waka approached a statue of a bearded man wearing a helmet and a long cloak. Naruto could guess that this summoner was the one Waka had been talking about. The group stood around Waka, watching as the blitzball captain repeatedly prayed to the statue. "Please, let Waka's prayers be heard," Yuna said under her breath as Naruto stood beside her with his hands in his pockets, wondering if their prayers were actually heard by the deaths. "Lord Ohaland, guide our feet," the red-haired man murmured as he formed the long prayer of Yevon. As the two of them prayed, the heavy door to the cloister suddenly opened. Everyone looked up to see 2 people looking at them. The first dark-skinned woman with hazel eyes and black hair tied up in a bun trailing into a ponytail, adorned with a feathery blue-white band. She had a red diamond mark similar to a Tsunade and Sakura's in the center of her forehead. She wore a revealing outfit consisting of an off-white bra, dark blue thong, black stockings and heels and long off-white skirt split in the back and front fading into gray towards the bottom. Both front and back are cross-laced. The man who was standing next to her had short brown hair, half-closed eyes and a square-shaped face. He was tall, and very muscular, wearing 2 brown belts adorned with iron buttons on his chest and bandages around his abdomen. He wore baggy light blue 3/4-length trousers with a green belt, and blue sandals with crisscrossing arm wraps of the same color. The woman looked down at them with a wry smile. "A summoner, aren't you?" Kamari followed closely as Yuna stepped forward to introduce herself. "My name is Yuna, from the island of Besaid." "Dona, and this is Barthelo," the woman replied, somewhat haughtily. "So, you're High Summoner Braska's daughter. That's quite name to live up to," she said bluntly before glancing at Yuna's guardian, clapping her other hand to her forehead. My, and all these people are your guardians. What a rabble." Dona chuckled. "I only have as many guardians as there are people I can trust," Yuna responded firmly, stepping up to Dona. "I trust them all with my life. To have so many guardians is a joy, and an honor, even more so than being my father's daughter." But as I recall, Lord Braska had only 2 guardians." Dona continued, unfazed by Yuna's determination. "It is quality over quantity, my dear. Whatever were you thinking? I have need of only 1 guardian." "Right, Barthelo." The short brown-haired man, Dona's guardian, nodded his head in agreement before stepping forward. Without the need to think, Naruto did the same, standing protectively in front of Yuna. The other guardian was about a head taller than Naruto and much more muscular. In terms of size, Barthelo looked like he could break Naruto like a toothpick with a twist of his fingers, but the moment he laid eyes on the blonde, he instantly nervously stepped back, causing Dona and Naruto's fellow guardians to widen their eyes in surprise. Barthelo, what's wrong? Dona asked in confusion. Barthelo stuttered, looking at Naruto fearfully. Guess we know Yuna does have quality in her rank, doesn't she? Naruto asked, smirking before waving his hand while feeling like the coolest bastard in the world. Now Shu, you are blocking my guardian's way, and if there is a brain inside that head of you then please kindly remove your summoner from here as well. Barthelo, wait, what are you doing? Before Dona could say anything else to protest, Barthelo picked her up and left the temple in a hurry. What did you do? Lulu asked in both curiosity and amazement. Someone like Barthelo couldn't possibly be afraid of Naruto, knowing nothing about his power. Well, I have my way with that. Naruto grinned before stepping to the side, clearing the path for his summoner, Milady. He said to the pretty brunette with a bowing gesture, causing her to giggle into her hand before walking toward the door. Let's go, everyone, she said, leading her guardians into the inner temple. Is everyone ready? Lulu asked her fellow guardians while Yuna was performing the prayer for the gate to open. Kamari and Waka both nodded their heads, while Naruto shrugged his shoulders in response. Titus followed as everyone stepped onto the elevator, but Kamari immediately stepped in the way and shoved the blonde sharply, causing him to nearly fall backward. Hey, what gives? He asked, nearly yelled, confused. You're not a guardian yet, Lulu reminded him. Tough luck, buddy. Naruto grinned as the elevator started moving. Don't worry, we'll be back as soon as we can, okay. After that, with the help of 4 guardians in total, it didn't take it long for the young summoner to get past to the cloister. While it was noticeably different from the one Naruto had come across at Besaid Temple, the ways to solve the puzzles were still pretty much the same as before. So guys, Naruto decided to start a conversation a minute after Yuna had went into the inner chamber to pray for her next Aeon. What kind of consequences Yuna would suffer if someone who isn't her guardians walk in here? It was something he had been wondering recently. She could be excommunicated. Waka answered. Huh. Naruto could only say, confused, but Waka didn't say anything else, and went back to wait in silence, so he decided, excommunicated, was a really bad thing. After what felt like hours, the door to the next chamber began to move, and Yuna emerged from the dark doorway, looking like all her strength had been drained from her. As she began to sink to her knees, everyone immediately hurried to her side, congratulating her for yet another success. So, what kind of beast are you going to summon this time? Naruto asked, excited to see another Aeon. He had been extremely excited when he first saw Jiraiya summoned a toad, and things hadn't changed much since then. Ifrit, Yuna said as she stood, having gathered some energy. I'll summon Ifrit. After that, the party left the chamber, making their way back through the cleared cloister of trial to the elevator, and met Titus on their way out, apparently getting bored because he had nothing to do. When they made their way up out of the temple, priests and villagers immediately surrounded Yuna to congratulate her on acquiring a new Aeon. Yuna spoke with everyone in turn, smiling politely and thanking people for their support, while Waka and Lulu spoke quietly to one another at the side, while Kamari, being the serious one, kept watch from afar. You alright man? Naruto asked as he stood next to Titus. He had been feeling negative emotions from the blitzball player ever since they left him behind to go into the inner temple. I don't know Naruto. He shook his head. This scene kind of reminds me of the day Sin attacked my city, and brought me here. Is that so? Naruto asked, feeling homesick. Yeah, I thought I had put my feelings for Zanarkand behind me, but they were there, and they grew inside me. Titus nodded his head before turning to Naruto, asking the question he had been wondering, what about you? You are far away from home as well, aren't you? Well, yeah, but to tell you the truth, I do, but probably not as much as you are. Naruto shrugged. The people at my home, my friends, they are working on a way to bring me back, and I bet they have already found it. Titus nodded his head in understanding. The only reason I am still here, is because I want to help Yuna. I want to help her save this world and its people from sin. If I leave now, I might not be able to come back, since I don't even know how I got here. Naruto said as he crossed his arms on his chest. I cannot leave this world behind, when I have the powers to save it. That's very noble of you. Titus admitted. Well, thanks. Naruto grinned before putting his hand on Titus' shoulder. Don't worry, man. I am sure you will be able to get back to your home soon. Thanks, Naruto. Titus smiled, feeling a little better than before. For the next 20 minutes, the party traveled back to the village in silence. Even Naruto chose to not say anything as they made their ways through the jungle once again. They had a few encounters with fiends, but there wasn't anything they could not handle, allowing Naruto to collect a fair amount of spheres for everyone. Hey Lulu, can we sell these for money? No. The black mage replied curtly. They are useful in every situation, man. In some case, they are priceless. Waka stepped in to explain, so we don't sell them. See. Naruto pointed at the orange red-haired man, team bonding. Lulu gave him a glance before continuing to make her path forward. Damn, she's cold. And he didn't try to say anything or be funny after that. He and everyone continued through the jungle and reached the village in the early afternoon. The group made their ways onto the boat, where all of Waka's teammates were waiting for them. Off to Luca at last. Waka said enthusiastically to Titus. Everyone was on board now. The matches start soon as we get there, so rest up on the way, yeah. Titus nodded and smiled at the taller man. As the sailors pulled up the boarding ramp, the boat began to pull out from the dock. Looking behind his shoulders, Naruto saw an old woman and a young boy waving their hands as moved away, and couldn't stop himself from waving his hand back. He had helped them with everything that he could, and seriously hoped that things would get better for them from now on. Thank you for listening. I do hope you guys enjoy. If you guys enjoyed this, what if you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notifications, and also check out the other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.